Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our artist talk today at a show featuring 22 female artists. And our show's name is In the Mood for Love. Although it takes its inspiration from Wong Kar-wai's film about romance, I'm thinking about love at a grander sense because according to Greek, there's many types of love. There's love for nature, there's love for self, there's love amongst friends and family, which all three of our artists kind of manifested and addressed that in all of their work. To start, can all three of you make an introduction about yourself, about your work, and just briefly talk about kind of what your work is trying to express in our show, In the Mood for Love?
I guess I'll go first. My name is Alexandra Evans. I went to school at the New York Academy of Art and studied painting. It's a highly figurative painting school. The work that I have in the show is actually called A Word for the Fishes. So it's interested in female archetypes and was using the archetype of the siren, but trying to kind of reclaim those female archetypes from a historically sometimes vilified nature of these archetypes, and sort of see her in a more individualized sense. And there is quite a lot of nature around her. So yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna Danyang Song, originally from China and then now based in New York City. So I generally use ceramic as my media. So the topic I talk about is visualizing the invisible emotion and also explore the healing effect of ceramic arts. You guys can see my work also like have inspiration from nature and also from our human body. So my inspiration is from the fire nodule actually. So it's all about our emotions and the color we see, like or the feeling we feel from the surrounding during our daily life.
Hi, should be my turn. Hi, everybody. My name is Xinyu. My last name is Wo, and I'm an artist. And these two green painting and this purple painting is mine. So my work is about the relationship between individual and the system. And I use Renaissance technique to organize the composition and combine a little bit like surrealism elements. For example, like I use like AI robots, like humans' body and nature. And there's some character is a result of some like and I also like visualize some kind of like character like in my mind. And yeah, I think that's it.
Alrighty. Thank you so much for briefly introducing all of your work. I think a lot of us are really curious about kind of what is the life of an artist. Can you briefly talk about it? What is your state of creation, or what comes to mind, and how do you work to achieve or to create the work that we're seeing at the gallery today? Mm-hmm. We can start with Alexandra.
Sure. So actually, I sometimes have a little bit of difficulty carving out time for painting. I have two very young children who take up a lot of time and energy, but luckily I have a partner who's very supportive of my practice and family. So in the past 3 years, he was actually in school full time, but we prioritize kind of having a studio and having a babysitter so that I could carve out that amount of time to continue working. So the painting that you're actually seeing now is really 3 years worth of doing painting during the time I could carve out while he was in school full time. I just moved back to the city, which has been kind of exciting, but I haven't set up my painting studio yet, but I'm really excited about the future to see kind of where the work goes from here. But yeah, on a day-to-day life, you paint when you can, which I think is a beautiful thing, because those daily moments sort of make their way into the studio too. So.
Do you have a picture in mind before you start painting, or do you kind of see it unfold as you are creating it?
This painting, even though it was 3 years of solidly working, the idea came a much longer time ago. And my work sort of morphs over time. I might have a general idea or a reference photo that I want to work from. That reference photo was taken over 10 years ago. But I had started the painting, abandoned it, which happens a lot. So I rolled it back up, forgot about it for a long time, and also abandoned figuration entirely. Even though I went to a figurative school, I abandoned it for, I don't remember, 7, 8 years at least, and then decided to kind of come back to it. So the initial reference was something that I already had, and I happened upon a painting by Arnold Böcklin, which was Saint Anthony preaching to the fishes, which was just this really surreal moment of all of these fish sticking their heads up, which I guess is based on a miracle of him preaching to the fish because the townspeople weren't listening. So he decided that he would visit the fish, and they all popped their heads out. So I tied the two together, the painting I was already working on and the Böcklin painting, which was the new inspiration, and sort of tried to fuse them together. But I guess there's a sense of obviously playfulness there. I've gotten the commentary that it looks very lighthearted on the surface, but there's this sense of terror lurking underneath. So I guess right now I'm trying to amplify that feeling of intentionally causing that tension in the painting. I hope it's working.
Thank you. Cool. For me, I think it's half and half as well. So I'm also teaching at School of Visual Arts. So I'm also running their studio. So it's kind of like teach class, I run their studio, and at the same time, like I work on my own work. So it's like a half and half. I get some inspirations from my student as well, and I think they enrich my perspective as well. And then also for like making my work, I think because now I'm kind of working with machine, so it's kind of like I have something in my mind first, but sometimes I also go with the flow. If the clay collapse or if the glaze come out, it's not as I expected. Yeah.
What about you?
For me, it's kind of like half too, and I teach a little bit like foundation as well, and I still like keep certain kind of like freedom in my daily life that let me have the chance to look at like ordinary people, like how they work, and how they breathe, and how they live, and how they die, and especially in this certain kind of like age, like some industry they disappear, and there's some like new industry like come out, and people lost their job, and there's a war, and there's a lot of chaos. And my work is about the relationship between individual and the systems. We are in the like giant system. So I can like catch that kind of like a moment that individuals wake up from the system, or they still remain the perception in the system. Like in the daily life, like they all have different kind of roles to play. There's teachers, mothers, like workers, like business owners. But besides these social roles to play, like who are we? Do we still have feelings? Like, do we still have the angers? Do we still know the definition of the loves? Do we still like really fall in love with someone? I think that's a proof of like the real like human being. That's a part like different from the social manner, like social order. It's kind of like a bug in the system. But I think like that part is beautiful, and that's a moment I would like to catch the perception in the giant system. Yes, this is where my own creation comes from. And speaking of the process of making art, so first, like based on the daily life, I probably see some like scenes, like some image, like kind of like inspire me. But if I would like to turn this into a great art piece, it's great art piece, not like fine artwork. So I have to spend a lot of time like making my draft, the composition, right? And how I design the light, how I design the character. So what's the order of looking. So where is the first point the audience probably will notice? Is there any kind of like element I should not take? So there's a selection, okay? Sorry, there's a selection. So in the end, like after everything has been done, I think yeah, the work has been made. So for now, I'm trying to set up some certain kind of like rule structure of my own creation. Like what I would like to create is a series of contemporary myths. Yes, yeah, that's it. All right.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I was thinking about how you not only have the identity as an artist or a curator, but other parts of your life kind of seeps into your creation. And do you see yourself kind of being influenced by the other things that you're doing? For example, like Alexandra, do you see kind of the shift of your work before and after you became a mom? And how does that kind of work into everything that you're trying to create?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the two are very much intertwined. Obviously, the act of creation is something only a female can do at this point in time. But yeah, I used to see my paintings as my babies, and sometimes illegitimate children, because I wasn't even sure if I wanted to kind of associate myself with the work that I was making at that time. It felt so new and different. But yeah, I post children and having that really intense experience, which it definitely was for me and is, I guess, still. I don't think that I've entirely let that experience into the work yet, but I definitely want to. It's something that I would like to explore in the work in the near future, and I've been thinking about it a lot. But I think the two are certainly very intertwined already within those acts. And yeah, my children do like to come in the studio when I let them to paint. So
it's really sweet. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah,
and for
sure.
Anna and Xinyu, know that you both teaches and you kind of interact with young artists that are kind of always coming with fresh ideas all the time. Is there something that you maybe didn't expect before you start the role of teaching that probably have an impact in your work, or is there anything that you find that would be interesting to share with your audience?
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. So like before I started teaching, like I didn't take lots of time for the draft, but when I start like teaching, and the context I teach is like foundation, right? So it's about like composition, perspective, like human figure, bodies, and how you design the light. So I have to kind of like, for myself, I kind of go back to the school again. And I feel like for the great piece, it's not like how much new element you add. It's kind of like you kind of like balance some like simple elements very well. I think that's a key. You don't have to add something. You have to organize it, set up certain kind of rule and reduce something. So the process of teaching do kind of like feeding me back. Right, it's interesting, right?
Yeah, I agree with her that actually the students' inspiration, also their perspective, feed us back. And also another perspective I have is ceramic is a very technical, like material, and the process is kind of a time-based like process. And for me, because my undergrad background, I have been trained like really hard on like technical thing. So every time I make something, I will think about, oh, is that really I can make it in reality, or I need to fight with the gravity, I need to fight with the firing, is I really can do that? Sometimes I will question myself and think about, oh, technically it shouldn't work. So sometimes I will not start to do that. But sometimes, like, because my student actually just elective class is not a major class, so people always come in with like no like basic knowledge of ceramics, so they are very brave. They think like, I want to do this, and I think I can do that. So we'll always try to like make it work, and later on we found, oh, actually it works. So I feel like make me much more like braver to try something. I think maybe technically it doesn't work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pushing your boundaries
Yes.
by your students.
Definitely.
Yeah, very exciting.
It's a very organic like interaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. And kind of going back to the creation process, I see that all three of your work kind of talks about relationships, right? Relationship between human and the system, or human environment, or maybe nature itself. Is there anything like kind of you want to say about nature and how it plays into your creation of your work? Because I remember Anna was talking about how your work was expressing the unity of the nature and the human being, and Alexandra's work, it's you're like referencing nature and ocean and kind of our relationship. And Xinyu's work, you kind of turn the human being into a tree, and like both of all three of your work kind of situate the protagonist in the naturalistic or kind of a surrealist landscape. And I was wondering kind of how all three of you kind of have, like, what's your take on like nature or climate plays into the creation and also the message that you're trying to express?
Well, I guess in my own work there is obvious references to nature, and clearly I think that tension that I'm trying to get at is a lot of internal anxiety about the state of the world, these endless horrific wars, the ecological crisis that is clearly happening before our eyes. And so, my own anxieties, I think, just pour into the work itself. A way to kind of internally work things out, but also, the figure in this painting has a sense of empathy, and I think trying to like grieve what is happening around her, while also being part of that cycle. I think the female body is just inherently tied to nature, throughout art history, but also in the fact that, like I said earlier, the female body is the only being that can create new life. So yeah, I guess we'll see how it kind of manifests, but there is also this weird intentionality in the work of artifice, making it seem more like a vaudevillian play or a child's play with the type of props. But yeah, we'll see how it kind of shifts from here. But I was going to say I also teach a composition class as well. And
oh wow.
I think you're right. There's so much about teaching that really makes you assess your own work and like your own process to see like what's working and what's not. But I think one thing, especially with my own process, is kind of I have this strict way of doing things, or the way I should be doing it.
Yeah, should be. Exactly.
But then it always kind of shifts, and whatever you want to call it, the muse or just the process takes over. And I think that's when the work gets good, is when you allow for these, whatever they are, happenstance. I call them happy mistakes sometimes, things that I think are going wrong, and then all of a sudden it's kind of like, oh, actually no, that's way better than I could have ever done it. And it just happened like that. So yeah, I think you're right. You kind of bounce things off your students, and also about yourself, like we're eternally, I think, learning in this process of being an artist. So yeah.
Yeah, as Amy mentioned, my work talk about the unity of human nature. That's a very traditional Chinese philosophy, 天人合一. So actually, like from how when people see the ceramic work, people know it's clay. So clay actually from nature. So at the beginning, yeah, like every time I work with clay, I think like, oh, I'm communicating with, I don't know, some spirits, like maybe from thousands like years ago. Also, because my work combined with the clay 3D printing and also with the hand building, so I think it's a very interesting metaphor for referencing like nature and also new technology. So that's the way I use it. And also, like I talk about visualizing the emotion. So I think it's facing our like inner self like naturally, because like the negative emotion or pressure, and like we all have that. Also the like little balls element I have on my work, the inspiration is from the fire nodules. So that is very interesting. That is how our body naturally generates something visible to like have some reaction of all those like invisible thing. So I think that's a very interesting, like our body already naturally having all those things together. I just kind of borrow that as my inspiration to do my work. And also a lot of my glaze and underglaze combination, also the inspiration is from nature, like green color from the trees, grass, or like blue color from the sea or sky.
So like for me, like speaking of the nature elements, so like in this street painting, there's all like there's a human figure and nature, and the nature is actually the original version of giant system in the human body, and it's kind of like individual, like still talking about the relationship between individuals and the system. And but what I would like to catch is a moment, like there's a moment of perception, or I can say there's a bug in the system. So like the system I created is not completely like based on the reality, right? It's from reality, but a little bit from different from the reality, because I want the audience like feel the system has something off. This is what I feel from my daily life, like how people walk, how people like talk, and what kind of like social order we have to follow. It's kind of like a giant system. And also like for now, we are in some certain kind of like AI generation. Maybe in the future, AI create new kind of like social structure. It's probably different from like socialism or like capitalism. There's like new kind of like system coming. So, but sometimes we probably could feel like something off in the system. Yes, so that's why what I would like to create in my painting. Like there's something off from the normal system, and also there's a moment that individual like remain the perception from that giant system. Yeah, so nature is kind of like a original version of the giant system, right?
I see. Wow, thank you so much for sharing very detailed kind of interpretation of all of your practices and kind of going back to the mood in our title. And you all talk about emotions, about maybe the anxiety or the dizzying effect of how like a system or rapidly changing society can bring us. And also you talked about how you were, I remember you were talking about you were using your gestures was the connection between the environment. Is there any like any kind of logic or reasoning behind kind of the colors or the ways that you choose to create your work and the emotions that you're trying to express or the emotions that you're feeling when you're creating the work?
Sorry, the question is about like
kind of the emotions that what you're feeling when you're creating, but also the emotions that you're trying to kind of convey in your...
Okay, so what kind of like emotions like we would like to convey in our works, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think when you look at my work, it's obviously very high chroma, and the body of work that I've been doing right now, which is sea-based or ocean-based or whatever. I think I used to call them neo-surrealist tragic comedies, but yeah. So I think that intentionality of having this really like light-hearted, high chroma color palette, and then you look further into the painting and notice all of the details, and that's when that kind of like under the surface terror comes at you. That is kind of lurking beneath. So yeah, intentionally trying to, I guess, sort of trick the viewer's mind into having a certain experience, and then when you enter into the painting, something slightly different. But yeah, I guess I was asked about the particular figure at one point and her emotions. Gets us sort of ambiguous. I don't think there's anything. I think at one point I was going to add a tear, and that might have been a little too far. But there's obviously this very deeply felt empathy for the creatures around her and the situation that's happening. And again, she is sort of part of that loop. And so yeah, I guess again, it's sort of dealing with my own emotions about all of this subject matter, being entrenched in it and not feeling like I can do anything about it, but working it all out with the paintings. Yeah, I don't know where to go from there, but I hope to a better world than we have created at the moment. So
That's all of us.
yeah.
Think about making process, also color. I will separate the two. So the making process, I will hand building the bisque form or 3D printing the bisque form. Sometimes I will push it to the edge of the table, or I will squeeze it a little bit. So from the shape, like with my hand, I squeeze it or I push it. Like I kind of know like how I feel at that time. Maybe like anxious. Maybe like if I squeeze it too much, I know like that day I maybe feel a lot of like stress or something like that. And for the color, I think my work shift a little bit. Before I use super like bright underglaze color, I think at that time it's more to express my anxiety or like stress at that time. But now I'm kind of shifting to more and more like soft color, like flux glaze, have a lot of dripping, like let people feel more soft and healing. I think because my emotions like status like change, so the color I use actually changed a lot. So kind of I think everyone have their different like logic of colors. Maybe some people see at blue like they say, oh, it's very calm, and for some people they feel, oh, actually it's anxiety. So I don't want to lead my audience like at a certain direction. I want everyone just cold reading my work, and I really want to know like how people think about my work. But for me, it's maybe it's just some basic thing from our surroundings. I remember like in my diary series, there's some like bright yellow and red one. Actually, that the inspiration just from the like in summer, in New York, it's really beautiful sunset. It's just from the nature. So sometimes maybe for me, blue is calm or anxiety, depends on what kind of blue. And then maybe the orange, like red color, actually is from the sunset. The pink maybe from the love I feel from my friends, I think.
Kind of like a diary.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, since my work talks about the relationship between individual and the system, and so like what kind of like emotion I would like to convey to the audience is there's two emotions in my painting. So one is very calm and classical and balanced, and another one is actually powerful and something off. So I use like warm and cold color to create that kind of like contrast, especially like in my new paintings. This blue green painting is like more new, and for now I'm making a new series. Like it's more like contemporary myths. So for that kind of like system, like I wanna make it like very balanced, calm and beautiful, but actually it's cold. It's very cold system. So I prefer to use some like green, blue, and cold color to express that kind of like balanced like system. And for that kind of like moment of perception, so I add the warm color in order to catch the attention from the audience. Right. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for all three of you telling us like revealing a layer deeper into your work. And I guess I'm asking for myself, but also for maybe audiences who have a various understanding level of contemporary art. I was wondering, like, when you, as the artist or as a creator, when you look at other artists painting, like, is there a process that you go through? Like, do you look at their work first, or do you normally want to like read about kind of their practices before you dive in? Like, is there any? Can you tell us how you three see art?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, maybe my background of kind of more of an academic painting background, very curious about process, you know, so want to look at the actual paint and kind of have all these questions about how it was made, sort of before wanting to know about the artist and maybe their artist statement. But yeah, certainly that definitely comes into play. And I can't wait to ask a question actually from the other artists on this panel. Yeah, I think my questions looking at art are more technical with the materiality of the thing. So.
Yeah, I think same. The technical part I will ask, especially I see something, wow, this is incredible, or it's impossible from my perspective. I will ask them about technical thing. But also, if I saw some work like kind of a storytelling thing, I will very curious about the story behind. So I think I will also ask about like the story they want to tell in this artwork.
Yeah. So for me, my understanding of art, the use of art, there's two ways. And the first is for those people in power to dress the chaos into order, just like the Greek time, the medieval Renaissance time, like how these people in power they dress the chaos into order. There's one use, and there's another use of art is to prove the human existence. So when I look into any kind of like gallery or museum, any kind of work, like wherever it's from like technical work, or it's like more like abstract or something like else. So the first thing I would like to take a look at is what kind of power the artist would like to convey to the audience. Yes, is that about like personal emotion, or like the artist like project the personal emotional to the age we are living in right now? Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I'll open up to kind of for all three of you to ask questions that you have been thinking about each other's work, and we'll see whoever. I think Alexandra, you want to ask about.
I mean, I know I talked a little bit to Xinyu about her paintings, especially the ones that you're referring to, the two newer works. And I don't know if this comes from like a sense of light or those orbs, but this sort of mystical experience that you have with like the glowing light. Can you talk about your work and I guess your relationship to spirituality, and also do you see this new AI future in like a hopeful sense, or is it something different? And how do you sort of tie those into spirituality, I guess?
It seems like there's lots of questions. I just would like to like clarify a little bit. So the first question will be like how you think about it, like spirit, like.
Well, is there a sense, do you think about spirituality in your work? I mean, to me, there's some sense of it with this like glowing orbs and like the new myth.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess it's a two-part question.
Yes, that's a good question.
This AI future.
Right. So for me, what I would like to create is a series of contemporary myths. So like in the ancient time, like myth is for people to explain like where is anger, where is a fear, and where is a love coming from, right? So nowadays, I feel like people probably need some certain kind of myths, but based on the contemporary. So I start like creating it, kind of like pull the audience like out of the reality. Yes. And about the AI, what's the question?
Oh, do you feel hopeful or optimistic?
Well,
or not optimistic.
Well, because I know some people from technology field. So like for the AI use, I feel like people in the power, they have to figure out how we use AI. Like what does AI means in our daily life? If we can figure that out, the future is still like hopeful. Yeah, if we can fix it out, how we use AI, right?
I will follow up on this question because I'm also curious about because your work actually talk about human and machine and everything.
Right.
So the topic of the show is in the mood of love. So I'm curious about like back in your work, like how you express like the story of like human, like machine, AI technology, and like in general, like
Right.
love topic.
There's a different kind of love, right? The love between you and your ChatGPT, and and the love between human to the nature, and the love between you and a figure you never met before, like something in your mind, right? But I feel like love, like my friend come with me to the Raphael show today to meet, and we are talking about like love. 恋爱脑, which means like you really fall in love with somebody like crazily, like on the internet, like people always talk about 恋爱脑, like that kind of behavior is like not professional. But I feel like that's a proof of we are actually human being, right? And that's a perception in the joint within the joint system, right? So it's not professional, but this is who we are, and that kind of like Simpson, that kind of love make us weak, make us like very weak. But that's a proof we actually exist here, right?
I also have a question for you. Thank you so much for sharing, and I resonate with your kind of sentiment about kind of 恋爱脑, where like the strong expression of romance or love is actually proof for our existence. The middle work where you can see a machine is worshiping a human, maybe old woman in the tree's shape. That kind of reminded me of a recent essay actually written by the founder of Claude, who's like one of the AI pioneers at our age. The title is called Machine of Loving Grace. And he talks about kind of this very positive future where AI's intention is aligned with humans. But as I remember, you were also talking about how this painting probably also has another layer of message. Can you talk more about kind of what's the act of praying, the robot praying in front of a human being in the form of a tree? Like, is there any further meaning to it?
Yeah, actually, like when I start like creating work, I try not to limit the information, like what kind of information the audience they will get. I just provide some kind of like platform for people to have their own like imagination. Like different kind of people, they have their like own own way of looking at this painting and have their own idea, right? Yes, I think that's it.
All right, thank you so much for sharing. Is there any more questions that you're curious to ask each other?
Oh, I actually have one question like for you too. So since I'm like really like catching this kind of like moment, that kind of like perception, like within the system. So in your daily life, is there any kind of like moment, like you feel like is there any kind of moment you feel like you are escape from the reality, like you are not that kind of like roles in your you are not playing your own role, you are just like feel yourself as a human being. Like is there any kind of moment like that, like for example, like you're not teacher and you're not like mother anymore, you're just like yourself, like I would like to hear more about this kind of like moment, like
I think for me, it's like when I'm just alone in the studio.
alone,
And
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
or like just alone in my room,
I
like
see.
like just resting or watching dramas or just like
Okay.
sleeping. And also like for ceramics, because every time you're using the wheel and everything, it feels very meditative. So every time, like when I'm doing that thing, also the 3D printing is just like going the same way round and round. I was just sitting there, just looking at it, goes the same way round and going up. So I feel
Me
that
too,
part, yeah,
right.
that part's like I just think nothing. I'm just looking at that and it's
Right.
like totally just the space is only leave to myself.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoy the process of making oil painting too, especially when you glazing the colors on the canvas, like layers by layers. I feel like, oh, I exist. Like I actually exist. I'm not a bug of in the system. And how about Alexandra?
Yeah, I would say the same. You know, and it doesn't happen all the time in the studio, but I think like when I allow all of those other voices to kind of leave the room, like my own critique and my own critique voices in my head, and really get honed into a painting and kind of like in the zone, yeah, that's certainly when it happens. You sort of lose all of your identities, like you said, and are only really focused on your own consciousness. But weirdly, it does happen sometimes when I'm looking at my children, like usually when they're sleeping, not in the daytime. But yeah, just wondering at this beautiful creation, I often lose myself that this is not mine, but this is a whole perfect human being who has a soul. But yeah, they're very magical and wonderful when they're sleeping.
Yeah. I think everyone version should be like a little bit different. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. On the topic of kind of the next generation, and kind of we see this, need to really tell the story of creation. And I was wondering, because I was reading about this the other day, they were asking artists to, if you have to describe kind of your work or maybe art itself to a sixth grader, how would you, like, instead of using maybe more complicated word, like how would you describe your work and also art itself to someone who is just integrating into the system early stage?
Which means describes what the art is to people which is not in the art world.
Yeah. What is the point of art, and what is art?
Yeah, just like what I said before, like art has two functions. Like one is to dress the chaos into order, and another is like to prove you actually exist. It's when I look at the Raphael show we just went to today, and there's many old paintings like on the wall, and when I look at the characters in the painting, oh, it's a real human being existed before. There's nothing special. Like the way they live is exactly how we are living today. Like there's all kind of like ordinary like people, like in the painting, right? So I think the only like only thing good about it is that's a proof they existed before, right?
Similar. I would say maybe just get whatever surround you, or you can get to capture a moment in your life, or something you want to capture or remember later.
And there's one thing I found out like really interesting is during the process of teaching, I try to tell the students there's a difference from like from what camera saw and what you saw, and then I found out like actually everyone, the way we look at the real, I mean the way we look at the reality, the way we look at the light, the color, and the person like pop out to you has been like tiny a little bit different. Yes, so I feel like if everyone start like being an artist, so there's nothing could be exactly same between two artists. So everyone has their own version of how they look at this world.
I don't actually think that you would need to really explain it to a 6-year-old. I think that they have it inherently within themselves. I've actually read some works by Mark Rothko, who taught a lot of children art and who also taught adults, and clearly was a established abstract painter. But he really talked about unlearning. When you're working through the system as a child and then moving into adulthood, you learn what is not correct in your own creative process. But going back to what you were both saying, I really think that making things, whether it's art or whatever it might be, that is inherently human. That is sort of what differentiates us from animalia. But yeah, it is. I mean, looking at cave paintings, which I do teach in one of my painting classes, it is a primal desire to want to, not only mimic what our lived experience is, but have connection to, animals and the divine and whatever spiritual sense that we might have about our lived experience. But yeah, it is seemingly, in my opinion, one of the most human things that you can do.
Wow. Thank you. I really love the unlearning and also kind of making chaos into order and also kind of a response to our own existence. If you don't have any more questions for each other, I'm going to open up the floor for our audience to see if there's any questions that you want to ask either all of three of the artists or maybe to a specific artist. Do we have any questions?
I want to ask a question about Indian specific because Lena was talking about sometimes you go with flow, like things turn out not as you expected. So I want to ask all of you, how do you let this flow, like how much you can allow this sort of uncontrolled flow to take over? How do you see your relationship with material? And also another question about, especially for those Alexandra and Xinyu, you work with painting. Painting are very, very old traditional medium. And how do you see the new possibilities of it?
Well, I think I touched on it a little bit. So I start with a kind of seemingly, traditional academic way of starting with a thumbnail and then going into, process drawings. A lot of my work is playing around in Photoshop and then starting on the painting with an underpainting. But then I think I mentioned it earlier that there are a lot of things that sort of shift along the way, and sometimes that causes a lot of frustration, but oftentimes it actually is these magical moments of saying, no, this is really not working. How can I sort of shift this? I mean, sometimes I might put it back into Photoshop, but there's certainly, and sometimes I might cut out things, pieces of paper and stick them on the canvas to see if they work in that sense. But yeah, it's a lot of back and forth, and then like you said, kind of being open to that flow, that happenstance that might occur along the way, which is a beautiful thing and often is way better than my original whole planned out idea. So yeah, letting go of that kind of control is always a good thing.
So about what like people ask me like what I do, I always say like I'm just playing with fire and clay, also water. I mean like yeah, I think like ceramics is a very cool thing because actually they use the traditional 5 element to have one piece there, right? The clay and just
Earth and
water, fire, wood, gold, and because clay is soft, especially during we were making it. So sometimes it will collapse, sometimes it will happen something else. So before I'm kind of like very like a perfect person and really like want everything to be perfect. But then I found like especially when I major in this major, I found like it's very, very hard. And I started to like playing with the like my perfectionism, like this kind of thing. When it's maybe when it's collapsed, of course, like if it's totally collapsed, of course I need to do it again. But when it's only like collapsed a little bit and it's just not like my sketch, but it looks really beautiful, I would just coil building and let it like go with the like shape it already goes. And also for the 3D printing part, before I wanted everything just print as beautiful as I designed already my model in the computer. But later on, I think about, oh, that's very interesting because how the printer extrude clay is exactly like a coil building process as our traditional handmade technique. Then if something haven't finished, I can just coil building on that, which is very interesting. Actually, like that is a real like combination of old and new technology and technique. So I think when I really working with all this accident, it kind of like give me a new direction of what I'm doing now. So now I'm kind of like 3D print a base and then coil building on that. So I think it gave me more new direction or inspiration for that. And also sometimes it will have some really good surprise from the kiln. For example, I remember like once when I still at RISD, we fired a wood kiln. And then because I mean the work in the wood kiln exactly like directly faced the fire. So sometimes maybe it fills off or it happens, a lot of things could happen. I remember one of my work actually fills off and I exactly like just stick on the kiln board. but because that work, I haven't glazed on that, so actually the parts like stick on that part, like the kiln shelf, it have a really beautiful glazes on that, but only that part have. And all my like really just standing success, I think it's successful work, actually they don't really have that beautiful glaze effect. So sometimes it have some really good surprise, and maybe I can't really copy it again. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so for me, speaking of the mistake during the process of making art, so mine is like a little bit different because I have certain kind of like OCD about like I have to make it perfect. So if I feel like everything didn't like go go with what I expected, there's two options for me. So first is like during this kind of mistake, is there anything new I can find out? And also like if the scene didn't like go with my expected, I just restart and do it again and again, like until I satisfy with it. So it's yeah, it's kind of terrible. And speaking of the new possibility of traditional painting, it reminds me of the whole art history. So from the Greek time, like the artists use human body as like container of the divine figures, and then there's a medieval and the Renaissance, like people start like talking about like rebirth, like we start like looking at the human again, and then Baroque and imperialism, like modern art, like abstract, like blah 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 blah. And nowadays, if speaking of the platform, there's lots of way you can play with the painting, but there's one thing like never change, which is what kind of culture, language, or I can say what kind of value you can create. Is that work like actually powerful? I think like the audience can figure out, right? What type of medium, what type of platform you use doesn't matter, but what kind of like power you would like to convey, what kind of story you are talking about, is that powerful enough? And also like speaking of like traditional like classical painting technique, I feel like most of people, they have misunderstanding about like that kind of like Renaissance technique. And it's a huge system. For example, the sculpture we saw outside and the building, how they balanced it, like the composition and the perspective, how they organize the character in the image. So for example, like usually humans' eyes, when we catch up like one image or like one painting, we can't actually catch everything. There's only like one point we can catch out. So which means you have to make a selection in your painting. So which spot you want the audience to catch immediately and which spot you want them to see for the next. There's an order of looking. So like what kind of artists can still extend that kind of spirit to the contemporary world? I think it's very interesting to look at. And also like since nowadays we have lots of tools, we have Midjourney, like AI, like image tool, and all kind of like computer or like camera. So is this tools make us like better, or there's too much like options like and today we look at the Raphael show as a met, and we are wondering why in this world, in this age of technology, people still need to look at those kind of like old painting like 500 years ago. Like what kind of like information is that, right? So probably like um, the organizer or the curator of that show is trying to remind people to extend that kind of like great spirit, right? Because nowadays, like there's lots of like noises or like chaos, like I mean like in our like daily life or like in some like other artwork you look at. So probably people want the orders back, want the taste back, right?
Yeah, I was just sorry, I didn't really address that point of moving forward. But I think I was talking to you earlier about an article I have on ArtNet for the millionth time, painting is dead. It was in reference to Whitney Biennale. Painting is out, sculpture is in. Which is good for you, I guess. I think they were more referencing installation work, but I honestly think that ceramics and traditional mediums that really do, going back to this like bring us closer to our materiality, clay. I mean, what is paint? It's oil and pigment, which is ground up minerals usually, So it's our relationship to the earth a lot of times. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of AI generated work is pretty boring, and that's probably the reason why people still go see Raphael.
Right.
But there are, speaking of the future of these mediums, there are some really interesting ways that I think artists are utilizing those tools like 3D printing and AI to kind of like move their work in more interesting ways than it might have otherwise. But it is really about the human experience and the human brain that is using these as tools rather than just producing some AI slop, which I'm sure we've all seen recently. So, but yeah, I'm very curious to see how it kind of manifests in the future.
Still necessary to have reaction or interaction with the physical world.
Absolutely. Do we have any more questions? Alrighty. I think so. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to the co-curator. Thank you. Alrighty. It's a wrap.